Amid a vast battlefield, banners covered the sky. Countless soldiers gathered, forming a grand panorama filled with an intense killing intent. War erupted, swords flashed, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. The scene was brutally cruel and utterly chaotic. In the place known as Chaitan Muram, a single bare foot trampled over everything, reaffirming absolute dominion. At the pinnacle of martial arts, amid a sea of flames and heaps of ruins, someone stood tall, one who unified the world. He was the King of the Fist. Asura possessed a tyrannical presence, his solid body sculpted like a statue. Before him, an old general atop a horse spoke in a sarcastic tone, claiming that Asura's madness had not changed and asking whether he had come alone to deliver his own life. The old man continued, asserting that no matter how strong Asura was, he could not possibly face 100,000 troops alone, suspecting that some scheme must be at play. Hearing this, Asura simply turned his back in indifference, repeating the sarcastic number in his mind. 100,000. With a sharp gaze, he thought that such a simple number held no meaning at all. Finally, Asura declared with contempt that his opponent was still playing with despicable games of numbers, and that was why they could never defeat him in their entire lives. The old general, enraged to the point of trembling, muttered curses at Asura's insolence and boundless arrogance. Roaring with fury, he ordered the entire army to charge and take Asura's head. Asura appeared alone and unarmed, yet his martial prowess was enough to dominate absolutely, repelling innumerable weapons with ease. With blazing eyes, Asura unleashed a surging wave of power that destroyed everything in its path. Before his might stood a force worthy of being called truly the strongest. Even the masters who had once commanded the winds and storms of Muram fell one by one. At last, under the name of the Sura Kingdom, a new era officially began. Standing atop an enormous mountain of white bones, Asura succeeded in unifying the world into a single whole. The capital of the Sura Kingdom, Mughal, appeared magnificent under the night's glow and the calm light of the moon. Beneath the full moon rose an imposing mountain, hidden within drifting mist and radiating a mysterious aura. At the foot of the mountain, loyal subordinates bowed their heads in unison, offering respectful congratulations to His Majesty. A man named Miobol, wearing a melancholic expression, declared that after defeating countless enemies and unifying the central region, there was nothing left to conquer in these lands. Asura, his gaze sharp and his patience wearing thin, demanded that Miobol get to the point and asked why he had summoned him there. Miobol lifted his head and stated that His Majesty was the only king in history to unify the central region through pure martial force alone. He continued his praise, saying that for the greatest king of the fist in the world, even the title of martial god was no longer sufficient to describe his greatness. Therefore, Miobol revealed that the reason for bringing Asura here was to offer him a manual, an esoteric artifact worthy of His Majesty. He declared with firm conviction that the only one capable of enduring the power contained within this chained, blood-stained manual was His Majesty himself. Asura murmured the word manual. His hand sensed the scorching energy emanating from it, but immediately afterward, a hand crushed it decisively, smashing it into a pool of blood. A single drop of blood fell into the ritual vessel, creating ripples that spread outward. At once, fresh blood surged from the bowl, flowing along the sinister chains. Stunned, Asura noticed that the chains were emitting a dark energy and shooting straight toward him. They quickly coiled around his arms and legs, completely sealing all his movements. Asura's eyes widened in disbelief at what was happening. His entire body was bound by chains crackling with red lightning, suppressing the power of the King of the Fist. Miobol and a group of traitors appeared, proclaiming that Asura's reign would end there, and that from that moment on, the Sura Kingdom would be under their control. They warned Asura not to even think of escaping, for before this chained celestial abyss, he was utterly powerless. Asura remained silent. His gaze shifted from shock to blazing fury as he looked at the traitor. Mial spoke coldly, telling him to accept his fate without resistance. Asura tensed, causing the chains to begin cracking. In a hoarse voice, he asked Miol if he had forgotten who he was. He declared that he was the incarnation of destiny and destruction itself. Alarmed, Miol shouted for his subordinates to immediately open the seal of the celestial abyss. However, Asura had already appeared behind Myogu, plunging him into extreme terror. A punch was unleashed, carrying furious waves of blood-red energy. Asura's face was splattered with blood, yet his eyes shone with unyielding resolve. He shot forward like an arrow, delivering a devastating blow that left Miul completely incapacitated. Landing firmly at the center of a circle of crimson energy, Asura released all his power, leaving the traitors horrified and unable to comprehend what was happening. Miu could only watch helplessly as an explosion of red energy engulfed everything. When it was over, Miobol stood still, staring at the pool of blood at his feet and seeing his own reflection within it. Miao and the other traitors looked upon the circle, and the blood-soaked ritual bowl as its glow slowly faded. The subordinates knelt in unison, cheering and offering congratulations to their new king. All hailed Miobal, the new monarch of the Sura kingdom. Miol raised his head, his expression cold and filled with pride, savoring the moment of victory. And so, the king of the fist who had once ruled the world met an incredibly ridiculous end. Suddenly, a system interface appeared in the void, notifying that he had been summoned as a player and asking whether he wished to participate. Faced with Azura's silence, the interface displayed only a series of confused question marks. Seemingly impatient, the system urged the player to press the accept button without delay. Receiving no response, Azura let out a punch that shattered the annoying system interface into pieces. At the same time, in another place, a young man stood stunned, wondering about the strange phenomenon that had just occurred. He scratched his head in confusion, with the unsettling feeling that something extremely unfortunate had just taken place. Suddenly, a ferocious red dragon lunged forward to attack as someone shouted a warning. "Yuta, be careful!" Judah turned around in shock, his face filled with astonishment at the creature's sudden appearance. He swiftly swung his sword, blocking the dragon's violent assault. Annoyed, Judah stepped back to maintain distance after the clash. The dragon began gathering energy in its mouth, and a notification appeared, indicating that the technique Infernal Breath was charging, with a casting time of 2 seconds. Judah looked up in alarm as he realized the imminent danger. The next moment, the dragon spat out a devastating fireball. The system interface displayed detailed information. It was an area of effect fire magic attack with damage, ranging from 3,000 to 6,000. Facing the flames, Yuta's Tower Climber strategy skill activated, rapidly analyzing the technique with an 85% progress rate. A notification appeared. Analysis complete. Yuta took a stance, his sword gleaming as he prepared to counterattack. The Tower Climber strategy skill automatically countered, increasing fire resistance by 150% for 1 minute and 30 seconds. He swung his sword, releasing arcs of light that split the incoming fireballs in two. Immediately afterward, Judah focused all his strength into the blade, preparing to unleash a powerful strike against the dragon. A golden magic circle appeared. He activated his supreme skill, Sacred Sword Asterir. A colossal pillar of light descended from the sky, engulfing the battlefield. The technique known as Celestial Judgment was executed. The interface reported that 9/10 of its uses remained. The dragon roared in agony as it was struck by the holy light. Its body began to crack apart. In the blink of an eye, the beast was torn to pieces, and a notification appeared. Mission complete. You have defeated the Floor 998 boss, Inferno Valrock. Immediately afterward, the final mission appeared. Reach the top of the tower and complete the conquest. Standing atop Valrock's corpse, Judah let out a sigh of relief, silently thinking that the battle had been truly dangerous. Seeing that the help he had relied on was suddenly gone, his small fairy companion fluttered anxiously around him and asked if he was all right. The girl reminded him that they were now only one step away from the top of the tower. With an excited expression, she urged Judah to quickly finish the tower so they could reunite with her family. Judah smiled, agreed with her, and regained his determination to continue. 3 years have passed since I was summoned to this world. I have overcome everything to reach this point, with the single goal of conquering the tower. Now only the summit remains. But why do I feel so uneasy? He could not help but wonder what awaited him at the top, the other side of this final gate. Noticing Judah's thoughtful expression, the little girl called out to him worriedly by name. Judah placed his hand on the door, repeating to himself that he needed to steady his heart. Scolding himself for hesitating, Judah pushed the door open with force. In a flash of light, he entered decisively together with his companions. With confidence, Judah thought, "Whatever awaits me on the final floor, there is no monster whose stats surpass mine. I will return to the real world." But at that very instant, the creature that appeared before him was a gigantic shadow engulfed in flames, wearing a macabre smile. Then, instead of a monster, it turned out to be a tall, muscular, powerfully built man who looked just as stunned, completely unable to understand what was happening. He spoke. "Who are you?" Judah froze, paralyzed by shock. The young man was left speechless. The fairy exclaimed in surprise, "A gorilla?" As Judah wondered who this man was, he stared at the stranger standing amid a heap of bones and thought in disbelief. "Don't tell me. This guy is the final boss." Meanwhile, Azura paid them no attention. He tore off his tattered clothing and wondered where this place was, until he finally understood that Miobal had truly imprisoned him here. Hearing Azura's voice, Judah cried out in surprise, "He can talk!" At the same time, he concluded that this must be an intelligent monster. He calmed himself, reminding himself not to be deceived by appearances, and tightened his grip on the shining sacred sword. No matter how he looks, he is the final boss of this tower. Without hesitation, Judah charged forward, shouting, "I'll finish this right now!" However, Asura remained motionless, his expression indifferent. Letting out a disdainful humph, Judah raised the radiant sacred sword, preparing to deliver a lethal strike. The blade slashed toward Azura, generating a powerful surge of energy. Pouring all his strength into the final cut, Judah roared, "This is the end!" The skill Sacred Sword Asterion activated once more, radiating a dazzling light. A gigantic pillar of light, celestial, judgment, descended upon Azura. The interface reported that 8 uses remained. After the attack, Judah formed a faint smile, thinking to himself, he's much weaker than I expected. But a deep voice echoed, "Hey brat, what the hell do you think you're doing?" When Asura easily stopped the sword with his bare hand, Judah was petrified with horror. A single thought filling his mind. This can't be. He stopped my final blow, pushed backward by a single hand. Judah clenched his teeth and wondered, is it because he's the final boss? He struggled to stay on his feet under Asura's overwhelming power. The tower climber strategy skill activated, beginning to analyze the target's weak point with a progress rate of 78%. The moment the analysis was completed, the skill automatically locked onto Asura's weakness, and Judah lunged forward to attack at once. The interface displayed a success probability close to 88%, a nearly guaranteed figure. However, Asura calmly raised his hand, prepared to stop the sacred sword. With a short command, "Stop!" He pinched the gleaming blade between 2 fingers. Immediately, countless red error notifications appeared, warning of a critical failure in the skill tower climber strategy. The success rate indicated by the ability plummeted abruptly. The final number that appeared left Judah unable to believe his eyes. Success probability, 0.43%. Completely stunned, Judah retreated quickly, keeping his distance from the one whose irrational power could not be measured. He gasped for breath, utterly bewildered at seeing a success. Probability below 1%, something unprecedented. Horrified, he looked at the mass of dark energy emanating from Asura's back, and finally wondered, what the hell is this guy? Asura gave a crooked smile and spoke in a calming tone. Hey kid, there's no need to be that scared. He drifted away indifferently, declaring that he would not bother fighting someone who was not worth his time, leaving Judah dumbfounded. What? Judah repeated Asura's words, frozen in place. You're saying I'm not worth your time? Asura crossed his arms and continued disdainfully. With your current level of ability, I won't waste even a single punch on you. Then his tone changed. His eyes sharpened as he asked, so let me ask you, exactly where are we? Judah suddenly smiled, as if he had understood something, and thought silently, I see. So that's why both Celestial Judgment and the Tower Climber strategy didn't work. Now I get it. This stage was designed from the very beginning to showcase his power. He burst into laughter and exclaimed aloud, "Ha! That's why my attacks didn't deal any damage. I didn't know there was a hidden mechanism like this here." Judah stepped forward confidently and declared, "Only by showing my true worth will I be able to deal damage." He took a stance, his body radiating golden lightning, and said firmly, "In that case, I'll show you and prove my worth." A notification appeared. Unique skill activated. Chosen hero. Effect description, all attributes will be maximized for a limited time. Judah roared, "Take this!" He unleashed a rising thunder attack, launching himself into the air at full speed and delivering a strike with the absolute maximum power the system's stat limits could grant. A slash filled with his full strength came crashing straight down on Azura. Immediately, King Yudah's status screen appeared, showing all attributes maxed out, 999. Asura glanced at the status screen and muttered skeptically, "Strength and agility, 999 maximized." Suddenly his gaze turned icy as he asked in a cutting tone, "You're talking about strength with those pathetic little numbers?" Asura clenched his flaming fist and said with contempt, "A world where people argue about power using numbers in a blue window is disgusting." His eyes burned crimson as he declared, "Where we are no longer matters." He lunged forward at terrifying speed and threatened, "I'll fix you from the root." Before the attack landed, Judah let out a growl and swung his lightning-charged sword to defend himself. But Asura did not aim at him. He spoke in a rough voice. "First, start with that disgusting blue window." The king of the fist. Azura-style destruction. A single punch shattered Yudah's status screen into pieces. The force of the blow sent Judah flying, completely losing control of his body. He let out a piercing scream, his face twisted in pain and extreme terror. The status screen that represented all of his power in that world was reduced to fragments. Immediately afterward, error warnings appeared non-stop. Error, error, error. The system has suffered severe damage. Judah was expelled from the tower. In his mind, he screamed in despair, "What the hell is this? How can this even happen?" He fell in freefall, roaring helplessly at the absurd, illogical nature of the situation. Meanwhile, the system continued to display errors. All stored attribute data has been lost. System restoration failed. All attempts to recover data have failed. A final warning appeared, marked with a yellow triangle. The system is shutting down. From above, Asura looked down and said, "Do you see it now? True power cannot be measured with numbers." He exhaled smoke and declared coldly, "That stupid numbers game ends here, kid." Judah lay face down on the ground, his eyes empty, able only to let out a weak broken sound. All of his power had vanished. Returned to level 1, Judah forced a bitter smile and admitted, "Yes, I was wrong." His memories carried him back 3 years, to the day he was summoned to a tower of unknown origin. He had climbed the tower with many companions, but in the end, he was the only survivor. Sitting among the corpses of his comrades, Judah had desperately asked his companion Nova, "Hey Nova, if I really conquer the tower, will I be able to return to my world?" The more he thought about it, the stranger it felt. They had been told to climb the tower blindly, without knowing what dangers awaited them. In a situation with no guarantees, wouldn't it have been more natural not to climb at all? Nova had to admit it as well. "As you say, Judah, even if we climb the tower, returning to your world might be impossible." But she quickly tried to comfort him. She reminded him that the goddess Asura had said that everything in this tower had a purpose. Because Asura had said it with a radiant smile, she firmly believed it. "Surely your journey, Judah, will have a meaningful purpose." The memory ended. Asura spoke coldly. "These boring number games end here." Judah collapsed onto the ground, barely able to let out a sound filled with helplessness and confusion. He sat on the floor in panic, shouting for the status panel. Nothing. In desperation, Judah shouted for the inventory. The mission window. Nothing. It can't be. The status panel is really gone. Judah screamed in despair. "Restart the system! This can't be happening!" Asura looked down at him with disdain and said, "Pathetic. You still can't free yourself from those number games in your illusion," he stated confidently. "Those disgusting blue windows will never appear again." Completely stripped of power, Judah trembled in fear and stammered as he begged. Please, show mercy," Asura replied coldly. "As I said before, I'm not interested in killing someone who isn't even worth fighting." He leaned down, grabbed Judah by the collar, and asked, "Then let me ask you," he said, "what the hell is this place?" With a sinister smile, Asura continued, "What do I have to do to return to my original world?" Judah froze. My original world? Could this guy also be a player like me?" Stammering, Judah answered, "I don't know how to return to my world," he explained in desperation. "Aside from clearing the final stage, there really isn't any other way." Asura looked confused and repeated the strange words. "The final stage? Clearing it?" Completely bewildered, Judah asked, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Wondering who this man really was, perhaps someone from another era, Judah began to explain awkwardly. "Well, to put it simply, then, as if something clicked, he snapped his fingers and said out loud, basically, you have to clear this entire tower." Asura repeated the words, and Judah nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, exactly. You have to clear the entire tower, from the first floor all the way to the top, without missing anything." With a satisfied smile, Judah advised him, "So if you're also a player, just start slowly by doing the missions. It's simple." Hearing that, Asura broke into a manic grin and roared, "Then right now, I'll crush this damn tower." Judah screamed in horror. "What? No, sir, that's not what I meant by clearing it." But it was already too late. Asura gathered his energy and unleashed a flaming punch into the ground. From the outside, the massive tower began to shake violently, then exploded from the bottom upward. Witnessing the apocalyptic scene, Judah could only gape in shock, a single thought echoing in his mind. "What the hell?" Amid the falling debris, Judah screamed in panic. "No, wait. Why would you destroy a perfectly normal tower?" A bright red error warning appeared. "Error. The tower has been destroyed by an anomalous entity." The entire great tower collapsed into countless fragments. Judah screamed as he plummeted through the air, shouting in his mind, "Who in the world is that guy?" He was horrified, unable to believe reality itself, destroying the tower with bare hands. How is that even possible? At that moment, a familiar voice shouted his name. "Judah!" Judah turned in surprise and saw Nova rushing toward him with a determined expression. Without hesitation, the girl grabbed Judah firmly by the collar, stopping his fall. Startled, Judah asked where she had been all this time, while she apologized for being late, explaining that she had to retrieve her sword. With urgency written across her face, Nova urged, "More importantly, let's get out of here. Something big is going to happen." Judah asked in confusion, "Something big?" Still dazed, he wondered what could possibly be worse than their current situation when the space around them began to distort. Suddenly, a pink alert appeared. "Error detected. Illegal access." Seconds later, a massive black hole began to form, swirling with streams of dark energy. The system continued issuing notifications, deleting all data related to the destroyed tower. Judah stared at the black hole in horror and cried out, "What is this now?" He realized that all the fragments of the tower were being sucked into that strange vortex. As he struggled to escape its pull, Judah thought to himself that if he were dragged inside, it would be the end. Another warning suddenly appeared. "Alert. Trash container almost full." Immediately after, the final notification followed. "Non-erasable data is leaking outside." Amid the storm of purple energy, Asura stood firm like a mountain, completely unmoved. He slightly tilted his head and let out a curious hum, murmuring that he felt as if he had stepped on something. Or perhaps it was just an illusion. He paid no attention to Judah and Nova, who were terrified behind him. With his arms crossed, Asura looked up at the sky and asked impatiently, "Anyway, why is nothing happening yet?" He glanced at the ruins and said, "As that brat said, I already destroyed the tower completely." From far away, Judah screamed desperately. "No, sir, Asura!" he shouted to clarify. "That's not what I meant by clearing the tower." Angrily, he scolded him. Even if you're incredibly strong, do you really go around destroying everything without thinking? Judah continued shouting. What if something happens? At that very moment, a torrent of dark energy erupted violently from the ground. A massive explosion of power blasted Judah backward. Seeing this, Asura looked surprised and thought, I thought a successor would finally appear. Judah stared in shock at the stream of dark energy surging from the earth. Asura, however, showed disappointment when he realized it was merely an unwanted guest. Suddenly, a white-haired woman appeared. Asura froze, utterly stunned, unable to speak as he recognized who had arrived. He roared in extreme suspicion when he realized it was Miao. Miao looked down arrogantly, questioning whether he was the bastard who had destroyed her tower. Hearing this, Asura clenched his teeth, his face twisting with overwhelming rage. He roared that she had been hiding there all along and charged at her at terrifying speed, his fury reaching its peak. He shouted, demanding how she dared to do this to him. However, Miao calmly raised a hand, signaling him to stop. An invisible force slammed Asura backward, crushing him into the ground and rendering him powerless. Seeing this, Judah screamed in terror, calling out to Asura. Miao approached slowly and coldly asked Asura if he had heard her question. She bent down and repeated it in a threatening tone, demanding to know whether he was the one who had destroyed the tower. Judah stood frozen, unable to believe that this woman could suppress a monster like Asura with a single motion. A thought surfaced in his mind. Could this be the goddess Nova spoke about? Pinned to the ground, Asura clawed at the earth, with his hands and said in a strained voice that he finally understood. He tried to rise, noticing that she was indeed different from the Miobol he had known, as she did not use that strange power. Even so, he stated with certainty that from the way she spoke, she had to be the one who built that damn tower. With an unrestrained smile, Asura asked whether she was also the one who had created those disgusting number games. Hearing this, Judah shouted in alarm, justifying himself by saying that he had cleared everything exactly as she had ordered. Judah continued shouting, furious at both the damn tower and those detestable numerical games. Still struggling fiercely, Asura roared, demanding that she immediately return him to the place where he belonged, his kingdom. Hearing this, Miao let out a mocking giggle. Right after, she burst into delighted laughter and remarked that he was quite interesting. She turned toward Judah and asked who had told him such nonsense, that destroying the tower would allow him to return to his world. Then she looked back at Asura and said that it was fine, that he could freely destroy the tower or even the status windows if he wished. She made him a promise. If he truly managed to destroy everything she had created, she would return him to the world he came from. However, she warned that it would not be easy at all, and immediately summoned a group of puppet players. The system notified that some data in the trash bin was being restored, and that puppet players were being created. Judah looked on in horror at the enemies that had appeared, asking himself, what is this? Trembling, he stared at the newly revived players and stammered, asking how they could all be there. Miao formed a sinister smile and revealed that from now on, the towers Asura had to destroy existed in great numbers within this world, while countless other towers were appearing in the sky. Without hesitation, Asura, his eyes blazing, charged forward at once. He threw a powerful punch straight at Miyobo, but she easily blocked the attack with a hexagonal energy shield. With reddened eyes, Judah gripped his shining sword and asked with disdain what kind of trash this was. Miao warned that it would not be easy, as other puppet players were also ready to fight. She continued, explaining that from now on, the towers he had to destroy were in fact these powerful players, those who had already conquered other towers. Miao burst into maniacal laughter, claiming that there were still many more such towers in this world. One of the puppet players began muttering incoherent words, calling out the name Yuda. That being shouted nonsensical orders like, climb the tower, quickly, everyone, go to the tower, as his body became shrouded in dark energy. Miobol declared coldly that no matter what power Asura possessed, the balance of this world would not be broken so easily. Judah roared in fury. What are you doing? He shouted that hadn't all his companions already died. He continued yelling that these were the comrades who had risked their lives alongside him to climb that anonymous, purposeless tower. With the utmost indignation, he demanded to know why she was treating them like this, and whether that was the reason she had brought them to the tower in the first place. Miola waved her hand, creating a gust of wind swept through the area, flinging Judah far away. She replied indifferently, wasn't it obvious? She declared that they were nothing more than pawns, necessary pieces to achieve a perfect world. With a satisfied smile, Miao explained that the world she had created was still unstable, which was why she could not do much without his power. Miobol went on to say that this was the reason she had forced him to climb the tower through virtual missions called tasks. Hearing this, Yuda clenched his teeth in rage and roared, demanding how she dared to do all of that for such an absurd reason. Miel replied coldly that she had no more use for someone like him, someone who had lost all his power. With a malicious smile, she channeled a surge of dark energy and ordered the Lord player to disappear. From that place, Judah ground his teeth helplessly. A tear rolled down his cheek as he cursed himself. He blamed everything on his own weakness, thinking that he never should have climbed that tower in the first place. He wished he had been just a little stronger, a little wiser, enough to erase that woman. Suddenly, a hand emerged from nowhere and grabbed Miobol by the face, leaving her completely stunned. Asura charged forward at terrifying speed, generating a shockwave that hurled Miu away. Completely caught off guard by the intervention, she could only turn around with a shocked expression, unable to understand what had just happened. Asura landed in front of Yuta and admitted that he had underestimated him. With a maniacal grin, he turned toward Miul and roared, demanding how she dared to touch his prey before him. Judah stammered Asura's name, but Asura merely said that his resolve was admirable, though it was still too soon for him to be the one who cut her head off. Asura lunged forward, throwing a fiery punch at Miobol. The devastating blow triggered a massive explosion, violently shaking the earth. "Is this your king?" Asura declared arrogantly, gripping Miu by the neck. As she was strangled, Miu showed interest and praised him, saying that unleashing such power without a system was truly marvelous. "However," she added calmly, "I will not allow that power to run rampant." At once, streams of dark energy bound Asura tightly. Asura growled, "What is this? How dare you use another filthy trick against me?" Instead of answering, she gently embraced him and whispered, "Please conquer all the towers of this world." She promised, "I will be waiting for you there, the highest point of this world." Then she vanished. Asura collapsed to the ground. The dark energy gradually faded from his body. His mind drifted back to the image of the girl from the previous world, the one who had asked him to conquer all the nations of that world. He stood up, looked over the ruins, and thought that no matter how much he considered it, she looked far too similar to that woman. Asura clenched his teeth, wondering why Miu had brought him to such a place. Suddenly, one of the puppet players launched an attack. Judah swung his sword just in time to block the strike. With a face full of shock, he shouted the names of his former companions, asking if they could recognize him, because he was Kin Yuda. Nova flew over and shouted at Judah that it was pointless. Even if they recognized him, it would only be a reaction from fragmented memories. Judah couldn't accept that. He clenched his teeth and resisted, holding on to a small spark of hope. Asura stopped the puppet player's sword with his bare hands and shouted at Yuda, asking what he was doing. Yuda called out to Asura in shock, but Asura simply kicked the enemy aside and said they didn't have time to waste on such trivialities. He ordered Yuda to quickly lead him to where those cursed towers were. Judah protested in panic, saying they were his companions, and asking what would happen if they just left them behind. Asura frowned, repeated the word companions, and asked if they truly looked like companions in Yuda's eyes. He stated coldly that they were nothing more than the resentful souls of the dead, and that clinging to them would change nothing. Turning his back, Asura said that if Yuda chose that useless melancholy, he could stay behind and play with those low-level demons for the rest of his life. Asura declared that he would go hunt that bitch on his own. The puppet players immediately swarmed Asura. He dodged and counterattacked effortlessly, moving through the encirclement of enemies. With an expression of contempt, Asura roared, asking how those damn demons dared to stand in the way of this king. "All right," Asura roared. "I'm busy, so I'll blow you all away at once." He unleashed a devastating strike. Asura King's Fist, Annihilation. After executing the technique, Asura suddenly stopped, sensing a change in his body. He said in surprise that he couldn't feel any internal energy within himself. He wondered if she had sealed his Dantia. Then he laughed with delight, finding it interesting, and never expecting that she would dare challenge him like this. Stepping back, Asura proclaimed arrogantly that no matter what happened, nothing could stop this king. He smashed the puppet players one after another, declaring that even without a shred of martial arts, this king is still the strongest. With a flick of his hand, he sent another enemy flying. Facing the horde of enemies, he smiled and said, "It's been a while since I warmed up. How about a fight for entertainment?" He immediately leapt into the center of the crowd, creating a massive explosion that hurled countless enemies into the air. Yuta stared in awe and thought, "Just as I expected, that man is a beast. He can handle all those puppet players by himself." But then he realized a serious problem. No matter how overwhelming Asura's power was, the puppet players kept reviving. Judah feared that if the battle dragged on, even Asura would eventually be worn down. "I have to help him," he decided, gripping the radiant sacred sword tightly. Nova flew over in a hurry and shouted for him to calm down. With worry in her voice, the girl warned that since the indicators were gone, if he continued to use the sacred sword recklessly, his body wouldn't be able to withstand it, and he could die. Yuta replied that he knew, but if he didn't act now, a female puppet player suddenly spoke his name. The image of a former companion appeared. Her face grotesquely disfigured as she repeated over and over, "Yuda, climb the tower, Judah." Unable to endure it any longer, Judah charged forward and drove the sacred sword into the enemy's head, freeing her soul. With burning eyes, Judah muttered that if he didn't do this, he would never be able to avenge his fallen companions. He swore that no matter what happened, he would find the woman who had caused all of this, to him and to his comrades. Judah burst into the middle of the enemy encirclement, shouting Asura's name. With a confident smile, he challenged him, asking whether he could endure this attack without dodging. Asura growled, asking what nonsense that brat was spouting, while Judah shouted back, telling him to keep drawing their attention like that. Provoked, Asura flared with anger and roared about how that brat dared to give him orders. Seeing this, Judah thought to himself, good. All the puppet's attention is on him. He leapt high into the air, realizing that this was his chance. He looked down at his companions who had become puppets, their faces empty, their eyes glassy, their voices heavy with regret. Judah clenched his teeth and whispered his final apology. With blazing eyes, he swore that he would, without fail, avenge his companions. Once more, he activated the sacred sword Astarayan, invoking its divine power. The technique Heavenly Judgment descended. Countless pillars of destructive light rained down, sweeping across the entire battlefield. A massive explosion of light engulfed everything, purifying the resentful souls. Witnessing this, Asura crossed his arms and scoffed, making a mocking remark about the arrogant boy. After the attack, Judah collapsed to his knees, completely exhausted. Asura approached and commented that he was surprisingly useful. Gasping for breath, Judah asked Asura to remember one thing, that the one who would kill that woman would not be him. With a resolute gaze, he pointed his sword forward and declared that it would be him. After saying that, Judah collapsed from exhaustion. Asura grabbed him by the collar, his face filled with surprise. That surprise quickly turned into loud laughter. He roared that the boy wasn't even worth a speck of dust. Asura demanded to know how he dared give him orders twice, but then decided to reward him for being entertaining. Lifting the exhausted Judah, he promised that if Judah ever became stronger than him, he would grant him the chance to kill that woman. With excitement, Asura said he looked forward to that day and carried Judah as they walked across the devastated land. Elsewhere, a mysterious figure stood atop a rock. It was a tall warrior wearing a deerskull helmet, a fur cloak, and wielding a battle axe. A strange pink energy leaked from the hollow eye sockets of the skull. In a deep valley surrounded by sheer cliffs, Asura sat in calm meditation. He positioned himself beneath a great waterfall, trying to recover his internal energy. Suddenly, he opened his eyes wide and focused intensely on breaking the seal within his body. With a thunderous roar, Asura released all his power, sending out a shockwave that shattered the waterfall itself. Asura growled, confirming what he had suspected. He couldn't perceive even the slightest trace of internal energy. Clenching his teeth, Asura thought that whoever had dared to seal his Dantian must be extraordinarily bold. He looked down at Judah, lying unconscious on the ground, and silently concluded that at this point, he had no other choice. Suddenly, he kicked Judah hard in the back and shouted, "How long are you planning to lie there?" Asura sent him flying into the cliff wall, causing a brutal impact. Caught off guard, Judah staggered upright and angrily shouted, calling Asura a muscle-headed gorilla and saying that he had finally shown his true nature. Asura responded with boredom, saying it seemed the boy still hadn't learned his lesson, and asked whether he truly wanted to die. He said he had no time for pointless training with him, that he needed to destroy those damn towers as soon as possible, and ordered Judah to get up immediately. Judah sneered and asked why he had to run around smashing towers with a guy like him, suggesting instead that they should search directly for the woman. Hearing this, Asura flew into a rage, roaring insults at Judah and demanding to know if he still didn't understand the situation. Asura declared that the woman was undoubtedly hiding inside one of the towers, because this cursed world was nothing but towers she had created. He roared madly, saying that if they destroyed every tower in this world, they would surely find her, and he would kill her. Judah replied indifferently, "Ah, I see," but inwardly wondered why he had to go along with him and concluded that the man had completely lost his mind. Nova whispered into Judah's ear, warning him that this man was far too dangerous. She reminded him that Asura had shattered his status window without hesitation, and that if they stayed with him, she didn't know what kind of disaster might occur. Suddenly, Asura turned around and shouted loudly, demanding to know what that insignificant thing was whispering. Startling Nova into silence, crossing his arms, he said it wasn't that he liked traveling with them, only that the brat's sword seemed useful. Asura then asked Judah whether he wasn't the same as him, also trying to capture that woman. However, he added that capturing her would be impossible with their weak bodies. From now on, he declared with a confident smile, he would strengthen their bodies. Before them stood a tower of strange architecture, rising straight into the sky. Judah stepped forward and said that they had finally arrived. Asura lifted his gaze to the tower, wondering if this was one of those she had created. He then turned to the white-haired girl and remarked that, aside from everything else, she had matured remarkably in just a few days. Asura added that with her current constitution, she could assist him in some minor matters. The white-haired girl, her muscles clearly defined, bowed her head and thanked her master. Asura praised her talent, saying that with more time she might even have cultivated internal energy. The humble girl replied that it was all thanks to his teachings. Master. Meanwhile, Asura looked around impatiently, wondering when that brat would finally arrive. He was visibly irritated at the thought that someone could be inferior even to his own servant, while the white-haired girl smiled proudly, flexing her muscles. From the bushes nearby, Judah panted miserably. Step by trembling step, he crawled forward and said he was coming, asking them to wait a moment. Inside, he cursed nonstop. These lunatics. How the hell do they expect me to run while carrying a log? His face was twisted with exhaustion, as he wondered if this was some kind of military training camp. He was even more shocked when he saw Nova tensing her body like a small beast, wondering why she had changed so much. She felt like a completely different person. At last, Judah collapsed, utterly spent, thinking he couldn't take even one more step. Asura looked down at him and said that Judah really was a pathetic brat, though at least he had arrived just in time. Turning his gaze to the tower, he remarked that it looked strange, far stranger than the one he had destroyed before. Nova, now muscular, asked her master whether they should enter, but Asura replied that he didn't see anything resembling an entrance. He smiled confidently and told his disciple that an entrance wasn't necessary. With absolute certainty, Asura declared that if he destroyed that damn tower right there, everything would be over. Nova cheered excitedly, shouting that this was exactly why he was her master, urging him to go forward and smash the tower with a single blow. Judah shot upright in alarm, yelling for them to wait and think more carefully, but Asura ignored his pleas and shot forward like an arrow. Suddenly, a series of warning panels appeared, announcing a critical error. Just before Asura could throw his punch, a dark energy wrapped around him, freezing him in place. Another message appeared. Forced teleportation to the interior of the tower initiated. Asura and Nova were swallowed by a vortex of purple energy, screaming as they vanished. Judah reached out helplessly toward them and shouted if they had lost their minds, saying this was exactly why he had told them to think first. The three of them were teleported into a devastated, ruined city and pulled toward a building from which a blinding light and piercing screams poured out. After the impact, Judah fell face down onto the ground, while Asura muttered, asking what those grotesque buildings were. Alarmed, Judah asked where they were. Nova whimpered in panic, crying that her muscles had disappeared. Judah lifted his head toward the towering skyscrapers and wondered if this was a city, clinging to the faint hope that they might have returned to his original world. Suddenly, Nova screamed and told Judah to look the other way. Judah froze in horror when he saw piles of corpses scattered across the streets, wondering why there were so many bodies. He realized that no matter what, this was not the world he had lived in, and anxiety gripped him as he had no idea where they were. Then, without warning, a mysterious voice echoed through the air, commanding, "Obey my call!" Instantly, dark energies surged out of the corpses, releasing horrifying screams. Asura stared in shock as the souls were violently torn from their bodies. Their bodies. He realized that the souls of the dead were gathering at a single point. A figure floated in the air, and remarked that the scene was fascinating. He wondered aloud whether these were the newly summoned players. With a disdainful tone, he warned them not to resist uselessly, because no matter how much they struggled, it would be meaningless. Another voice followed, declaring that the only one who could reach out a hand was he himself, as dark energy poured out from him. "The summit of this tower is me," he proclaimed, and with that declaration, he summoned a gigantic skeleton bearing the title Ghost King. Judah cried out in horror, "A skeleton!" But he immediately corrected himself in his thoughts, realizing that this creature belonged to an entirely different category. The massive skeleton, its eyes blazing with purple flames, released a terrifying roar. Seeing Asura standing motionless, Judah shouted urgently, warning the old man to get out of the way because it was extremely dangerous. Asura merely smiled in contempt and replied, You call something like that a threat to me?" He threw a single punch. The sheer force of it shattered the giant skeleton into countless pieces. The shockwave from the blow spread outward, annihilating everything in its path. Asura smirked and dismissed the skeleton as nothing more than pitiful trash. The mysterious man showed clear irritation and said he hadn't expected Asura to dare confront him with such little apparent strength. Asura pointed at the ground and questioned coldly, "With that level of power, you dare claim you're at the top?" He called him a coward who only knew how to hide behind monsters, branding such behavior as arrogant and pathetic. The mysterious man frowned and repeated the words, "Hiding behind a monster? Floating in the air and surrounded by numerous creatures?" He remarked that this was quite interesting. He then shifted his attitude, saying that he had changed his mind and now wanted Asura to keep struggling until the very end. With a provocative gaze, he declared that he would see just how long Asura could survive as he put his strength to the test. "Yeah." The demonic horde charged forward in unison. At this time, Asura's face had already darkened, his eyes narrowing with cold gloom. "Test subject." As he spoke, he swung his arm, and a violent wave of killing intent formed in an instant. "This bastard daring to use me." The leading monster did not even have time to roar before being blasted away. Immediately after came Asura's voice, filled with contempt. "A test subject?" Witnessing this scene, the god of death's eyes suddenly flashed with bone-chilling coldness. Without a single wasted movement, it attacked. Tens of thousands of chains tore through space and shot forward, wrapping tightly around both of Asura's arms at the same time, causing him to freeze for a brief moment. Huh? Seizing this opening, the Hellhound suddenly appeared, leaping forward with an ear-splitting roar. The heavy blow slammed down, shaking the earth and smashing it apart. It seemed as though the beast had succeeded, but its furious roar abruptly turned into a miserable scream. The Hellhound's body was ripped into countless pieces by an invisible force. Asura glanced at the pile of shattered remains before him, the corner of his lips curling with open disdain. How ridiculous. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded behind his neck, making him turn his head calmly. Summon the Bone Legion. Summon the Abyssal Demon Pack. Asura remained composed. He immediately lifted his foot and stomped down with full force. The instant his foot touched the ground, a shockwave erupted, blasting the monster swarm into the air. Without giving his enemies time to breathe, the red demon seized the moment and lunged forward like lightning. Yet that violent punch was stopped by Asura with just one hand. At once, the ground trembled violently again as countless monsters surged up, chains being summoned once more. Asura's eyes narrowed, killing intent condensing at the same time. What? Only now did the Spirit King speak calmly, his tone carrying a hint of curiosity he could not suppress. You have no stats. I can't even sense any skills from you. So how can you possess such terrifying power? As soon as he finished speaking, a pair of long swords glowing with cold brilliance appeared in his hands. The Spirit King gripped their hilts tightly, his voice gradually turning icy. No need to answer. I will drain your soul and verify it myself. His figure suddenly shot forward. At the same time, the Authority of Annihilation was activated. Explosive power erupted outward, and even Nova and Yuta were swept up by the shockwave, forced to raise their arms to shield themselves. When the pressure finally subsided, Yuta's eyes went wide in shock, his mind violently shaken. What the hell is this? This insane destructive power, what is it? One-on-one evenly matched with that old man? What in the world is this bastard? Beside him, Nova's face had turned deathly pale. He spoke in a hurried voice. Run! Run, Yuta! He's no longer a normal player. I don't know why, but I can clearly feel it. There is a power coming from that man, something on the same level as a goddess. The entire city is now nothing but ruins, buried in smoke and dust. Amid the devastation, the Spirit King's footsteps remained slow and unhurried. So this is the final soul at last. What a troublesome game. But now, I have already ended my contract with the goddess Suya. He stretched his hand into the air, and a mysterious dark energy immediately gathered wildly. O Nameless One, the authority to devour souls has been activated. The Spirit King's voice turned glacial. Your soul will be mine to use. However, before that power could reach its target, Asura had already moved. The monster was instantly cut in half, and Asura's voice rose, carrying overwhelming killing intent. Goddess, are you talking about that bitch? Asura's voice turned ice cold. She was the one who sealed my Dantian, wasn't she? I was already looking for her. If you don't want to die, tell me where she is. The Spirit King curled his lips slightly. A thin smile appeared, light yet filled with cruelty. Ha, of course it won't be that easy. In an instant, tens of thousands of small blades materialized, spinning around him like a deadly storm. But don't misunderstand. The one who will die in this tower, he raised his hand and coldly pronounced judgment, is you. The blades whistled through the air and shot forward, but Asura swept them all aside with a single wave of his hand. One nearly pierced the center of his forehead, yet he caught it between his fingers at the last moment. Without hesitation, Asura hurled the blade back with even more terrifying force. Although the Spirit King twisted his body to evade it, the residual wind still sliced off a strand of his hair. The blade continued its path of destruction, smashing straight through the wall behind him. Seeing such power, he did not feel fear. Instead, he burst into wild laughter. Ha! What a stubborn bastard! Dark magic surged and poured into his arm. Fine, I won't deny it anymore. You really are strong. In that case, I'll take you seriously. The authority of Hades' armor was activated. The armor of the King of Death instantly covered his entire body. The Spirit King stamped his foot and shot forward like a poisoned arrow. The twin swords in his hands tore through space again and again, carving out dense arcs of swordlight. Noticing that Asura was still able to evade, he raised his swords and slashed downward with all his might. The earth-shaking strike fell, yet Asura still slipped away at the last instant. Seizing that tiny opening, he curled his lips in disdain. Is that all, kid? The Spirit King's face hardened. Not only did his power not weaken, it erupted even more violently. Not even close. Using the rebound force, he leapt into the air, pouring all his strength into his twin swords. Asura did not retreat. His surging energy gathered into his iron fist. You're right about one thing. With the gap in power between you and me, if you try to block my attack head-on, you'll never win. The two opposing forces collided violently, creating an explosion that swept everything around them away. The Spirit King was blasted backward, his face dark with discomfort. But the next moment, he suddenly burst into mad laughter, endlessly provoking. Yes, you really are strong, but only to this extent. Let me tell you something. You're looking for the goddess Juya, aren't you? He sneered. She is the one who gave me this tower, but I still didn't hold full authority, so I made a pact with her, sacrificing 10,000 player souls to become the tower's true heir. Before he even finished speaking, his figure abruptly appeared behind Nova. I've already collected enough souls. Seeing this, Yuta cried out in shock. In Nova's mind, a freezing terror surged up. Damn it, what is he doing? Ignoring the vast difference in strength, Yuta swung his sword and charged like a moth into flame. You bastard, what are you trying to do to Nova? At the same time, a monster emerged from the void, accompanied by a cold sentence of judgment. Small fry, step aside. A gigantic fist slammed straight into Yuta's chest. His scream was choked off as he was sent flying, blood spraying from his mouth. The Spirit King calmly concluded, "It's useless to try to stop me. There is nothing you can do anymore." At once, the emotionless system voice echoed. Ritual of Inheritance mission complete. The 10,000th soul has been collected. All tower authorities are about to be unlocked. Remaining time, 1 minute 4 seconds. He slowly turned toward Asura, his tone probing. Are you a necromancer who controls vengeful spirits? Asura's face was cold to the bone, his deep voice filled with disgust. In my kingdom, there are also a few who use such low-grade magic. Despicable heretics. I didn't expect to see such filthy tricks here. He raised his hand. A powerful energy began to gather. Originally, I did not intend to. I normally despise using such filthy magic. But since you've crossed the line, I'll let you witness the true power of necromancy. The moment those words fell, an overwhelming aura erupted from Asura's body. The Spirit King's expression changed drastically. He stood frozen in place as if struck by lightning, a trace of panic surfacing in his mind. Impossible. The souls I collected? Are they being stolen by that bastard? No, that can't be. According to the system, this should be absolutely impossible. Asura coldly manipulated his spiritual power. Invisible currents of necrotic energy wrapped tightly around Yuta and Nova, binding their bodies. Go on. His voice was calm and merciless. Struggle as much as you like. Brats, Asura lowered his voice, but the killing intent surged like a tidal wave, drowning the entire space. Your turn will come later. For now, his eyes glinted with chilling resolve. Crush that damn bastard into nothing.